This week on London Real, we have James Rhodes, a classical pianist and author of the book Instrumental, a memoir of madness, medication, and music.
Because most classical concerts now, I don't think they really think about the audience. It's the performer and the music. These guys, heroic musicians, they composed and created despite the pain, not because of it. You know what, you can go through 5 years of getting absolutely just brutally raped. You can end up trying to kill yourself. You can end up with all kinds of drug addiction issues and self-harming and almost unsurvivable. And actually you can come out the other end. And music played a big part in that.
And yet this book was almost not published. Did you ever in your wildest dreams think that could happen when you started writing?
No, fuck no. I mean, we're in Britain. We don't ban books in this country. What the fuck?
London Real presents James Rhodes, Instrumental.
The lesson for me is we don't say to children, we don't talk about this.
This week on the show, we have the classically trained pianist, Mr. James Rhodes, who is also the author of the book Instrumental, talking about his life and struggles as a young boy who dealt with sexual molestation to now his rise and further rise about making classical music cool again. And James is fascinating because at his concerts, which actually many of our Academy members have already attended, he goes and talks about the piece of classical music and then performs it. And James has a way of humanizing an art form that's been taught to us over the years should be boring. It should be listened to in silence. It should be performed by people that wear dinner jackets and funny looking clothes while they are just somber the whole time. And so James has an amazing way of reintroducing just something that he thinks links all of us humans, which is classical music. He also has a very troubling backstory, and one that the Supreme Court here in the United Kingdom almost told him he wasn't allowed to talk about in his book. And we get into that during the book, but it comes from the fact that his ex-wife didn't want his young son to read about some really heavy issues that he had as a young boy, where you know, he was the victim of sexual abuse. And we talk about that during the show, but we also talk about his fascinating journey from a worker in the city of London like me in the finance business to finally ended up training and then becoming a pianist, a professional pianist. And it's a fascinating story. I actually really like James as a person, and because he's really frank and he's really open and honest. He's also got some very famous friends like Benedict Cumberbatch and Darren Brown and things like that, but I can see why, because James really is really open and he really tells you like it is. And so I think you're really going to enjoy this. I think this is going to be one of our blockbuster, six-figure London Real episodes because you know, James is a real guy with a real message and really amazing music too. So sit back, relax, and listen to this show. His book, by the way, is amazing. It also comes accompanied with a Spotify playlist with a song for every chapter of the book. And again, I've started reading his book and I love it. The first 10 pages really grip you, so I highly recommend picking up a copy of that. So there you go. I hope you're enjoying the graffiti here in Shoreditch. You know, I love getting out in the streets and showing you where the studio is. And a lot of you have been asking me about, Brian, what's this thing called the Academy? What is this thing? Well, the Academy is a collection of the hardest core London Reelers from around the world, about 1,000 of them, that build better versions of themselves, that come together as a community, as a tribe, and we try to accomplish goals and push ourselves to the next level. No more watching episodes of London Real and then turning off YouTube and sitting back on the couch and dreaming of what you could do. Now, we get you in there, we pair you up with buddies, and we make you accomplish things. And so we have premium content on the site. You can watch live episodes, you can watch success secrets, you can watch my webinars. You can also plug into our very own social network, and on top of that, meet people offline in locations all around the world, including London Real Studios every 2 weeks, right up there. We have a focus group. You can meet me, you can sit in the chairs, smell the leather, meet Winston, and talk to us for about 3 hours about where you want to go with your life and what you want to do to really make some changes. We are very goal-oriented. I like getting things done. That's just what I do. And so if you join, we're going to help you get things done. So I put together a short 3-minute video about what the Academy is all about. And here it is. Check it out.
Entrepreneurial journey, it can be a lonely road. I push myself in so many areas, but you know, you can't do it all yourself.
The thing about the Academy is, it's like, look, you have the ideas, you have the ability, you have the skill, and you have the sort of ambition for yourself. But when you have a group of people pulling you forward, it's so important.
Accountability is what's missing from most of the programs or any gurus or any internet mentor that I had before.
I wanted to get some accountability. I wanted to make myself accountable to a group, to you.
The reason we started the Academy is because I felt like we were doing these amazing talks, like we'd have a Peter Sage episode or a Dan Pena episode or a Kala or someone, and you get super inspired, and then YouTube stops, and then you go back to your life and you don't make any changes. And it was just like, it felt like, what are we doing? If you're designing your life right, the good times are now. And in a few years, you'll look back and say, wow, that was amazing.
The thing about the Academy is it has so many different sort of layers to it. I think your web seminars are awesome. The way you broke it down and the style of your teaching is pretty awesome.
I like the feed. When I have to motivate myself, I kind of look at others struggling and getting over those struggles. So I actually follow daily the feed.
Best feature would be the sort of Facebook aspect of it, the social media aspect of it, as in creating a profile with your goals, your dreams.
Everyone's on the same vibe, and we may be at different stages in our journeys, but everyone's on the same page at the end of the day. Everyone's really trying to push themselves and building the best you. It really resonates with me.
And the fact that I'm committing a small amount of money and the fact that I'm actually trying to interact with those people means that I'm invested and means that I will keep it for the long run.
You have to be serious about yourself and what you want to achieve. And if you're serious about yourself, this is going to be such a fantastic platform.
London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is James Rhodes, who is a classical pianist and author of the book Instrumental, a memoir of madness, medication, and music. In your book, which was almost banned until the Supreme Court unanimously overthrew an injunction in May of this year, you detail your on-again, off-again relationship with music, being the victim of child rape at the hands of your primary school gym teacher, and attempting to take your life in a mental institution. But in the past few years, you made a remarkable transformation, becoming the first pianist ever to receive a record deal with the world's largest rock label, Warner Brothers, with all 5 of your albums topping the iTunes classical charts. James, welcome to London Real.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. What a lovely introduction.
You like that?
Yeah, we don't have much more to say, really.
Get out of here. Some people say I should just do those and stop the rest. We've got so much to talk about. Your book, you know, I know you played last night live in London with, you know, Nicole Kidman on the stage. There's so much to talk to you about, the injunction. But since we've got the time, I was wondering if we could start off with the music.
Yes,
and
please.
Something you talk about in your book, which is your Princess Diana moment you had at 7 when you found a cassette tape of a piece of classical music.
Yes.
Can you tell me what happened? And then also for an ignorant American, how is that a Princess Diana moment?
Ignorant American, stop it. No, look, There's such the one thing that I can't stand is there seems to be this kind of dichotomy between those who know about classical music and everyone else, and I don't. That makes no sense to me at all. We all know about classical music. I think most of us want to know maybe a little bit more about classical music, but it's incredibly hard to find out where to start, and it's very off-putting. It seems designed to put people off. It seems to have been, I don't know, appropriated by a certain kind of person who wants to keep it just, you know, for themselves and not share it. And when I was a kid, I found this old cassette tape, and it was piano music. I was addicted to the piano, always have been, always will be. But originally the piece of music was written by Bach for solo violin, which is quite an intense instrument all on its own. And he wrote it after his wife died. Bach was, I mean, entrenched with grief. He was orphaned by the age of 10. 11 of his 20 children died in infancy or childbirth. His siblings died, and then, I don't know why I'm smiling, I mean, it's terrible. And then the love of his life dies like that, no warning, just bang, she's gone too. And he writes this piece of music. He kind of builds this musical cathedral to her memory. And there's this 15-minute movement called the chaconne in it that a couple of hundred years later, Italian pianist and composer, he transcribes for the piano. And so you can, they're very different instruments. The piano is bigger. I mean, there's a lot more power, a lot more resonance, and so he takes this piece of violin, and it's just like he pumps it full of steroids, it knocked me to the floor. For me, it was classical. That's a very important distinction. I think everyone will remember the first time they heard a piece of music that really resonated with them. Maybe it was after a breakup, or maybe it was they were watching Top of the Pops when they were, you know, 9 years old, and they saw something and they thought, oh, I want to be a rock star, because all kids want to be musicians. For me, it just happened to be classical, and it was this piece, and I couldn't put words to it, but of course Ian Forster said something like it's the deepest of the arts and deep beneath the arts. It goes underneath everything. You know, you can look at a painting or you can read words, but with music, it bypasses everything. It just smacked me right in the soul, and I was hooked ever since then. And now, here's the great thing, I'm playing the bloody thing. I'm performing, I've recorded it, I perform it in concert halls where I would go and see my heroes perform. And I'm up there too, playing the same piano in certain cases that these guys played. And it's weird, isn't it? Lucky. I'm really, really lucky. You think, you know, you're 7 years old and you think, I just imagine being able to play this, and then imagine being able to play it on stage, and then fast forward, and here I am playing it on stage, and it's just, still I get goosebumps thinking about it. I don't know how I got here.
You mentioned Bach's pain that he went through in his life, and you know you've had your fair share, but you don't think that all great art comes from pain, do you?
No, the opposite. No, I don't know anyone who hasn't gone through, I mean, monumental levels of pain. That's the human condition, isn't it? It's impossible to live life without experiencing trauma to some extent or another. These guys, these are like fucking heroic musicians. They composed and created despite the pain, not because of it. They created despite the stuff going on in here, the depression, the anxiety, the awkward, total lack of social skills, the really bad hair, the syphilis, the alcoholism. They composed despite that, because it's the one thing that provides a kind of half a way out from that madness. You know, it's either sit at the piano and just pour your soul out onto the manuscript page, or throw yourself out a window. I mean, I really believe that. And just, they happen to be known as having experienced trauma and being mentally quite unstable because they're so well known. But I guarantee you line up 1,000 people, whether they're working in Burger King or Waterstones, or, you know, they're a Hollywood A-lister, they're all going to have, you know, enormous levels of trauma.
You mentioned classical music it doesn't seem to be, you know, allowed to the masses sometimes, or we're not always taught that we can access classical music. But you're saying that that seems kind of silly, and yet you kind of bring it back to the masses because you'll play with, you know, jeans on and tattoos and play your way, and you're signed by a rock label.
Look, I try. No, actually, I've set up my own label now because I just think, you know, I'm a massive control freak. I want things done the right way. I don't want to think about, you know, an album cover and know that that's going to take 6 months to get approved and signed off on it. I want it done now in the way that I feel is right. And a classical, I mean, just the industry itself, it's filled with such awful people. I mean, it's just rammed full with assholes. I mean, it's just, it breaks my heart. It's just, I think of it a bit like the way people feel about bankers when the whole subprime thing started happening. It's predicated on vast levels of greed and snobbery and narcissism, and why? You know, if Mozart came and saw a concert today, he'd just fall over laughing at the way it's presented and the way it's treated. And the one thing that must never change is the music. Like, it's just immortal. It's perfect. Everything else around it, I think, is up for grabs. Why is there any other genre of music in the world, in history, where people have said, okay, you have to wear a certain outfit? I mean, would you call Matt Bellamy from Muse or Chris Martin from Coldplay and say, you know, we'd love you to do a couple of nights at the O2, but you're gonna have to wear a white tie and tails because that's, you know, what we do. I mean, come on, why? Who decided that it has to be this sacred, stick up the ass kind of, God forbid you clap in the wrong place, or, you know, you cough, or you make any noise, or, you know, it's so weird. So I wear what I'm comfortable in, not to make a statement, just because, I mean, why not? And I introduce the pieces from the stage. I talk about the fact that, you know, Beethoven was, he's so much more than just the deaf composer. This guy was almost beaten to death twice before he was a teenager by his drunken dad. This kid, he's 16. He takes his father to court to make sure his father's income goes direct to Beethoven, so that Beethoven, this teenager, is able to feed and clothe the family, because he knows his dad would just spend it on drinking. You can't imagine the shit these guys go through. And then he creates music that just, and he's deaf. I mean, come on, it's insane. So to talk about that stuff and to set up the pieces and then play them, to me, it shows, I hope, a certain amount of respect for the audience. Because most classical concerts now, I don't think they really think about the audience. It's the performer and the music, and that's it. And actually, you might as well just put on a CD and listen at home, you know, with a cigar and a glass of scotch. It's important to share things with the audience, because otherwise all that happens is that, you know, I'm playing a Beethoven sonata on stage, the lights are kind of up high, and these guys are like reading program notes about sonata form in Beethoven's Vienna. Like, come on, really? While I'm playing the fucking thing, why bother? It just... So I like lights down. I mean, where else can we go in this day and age where we're not assaulted by commercials and tweets and Tinder and Facebook likes and, you know, reality TV, and we can just switch off and put your arm around a hot date and close your eyes and forget about the mortgage payments and the school fees and the angry ex-wives and the, you know, just the noise and everything. Just for an hour or an hour and a half can switch off.
Did you ever consider playing a different kind of music than classical because of all the hang-ups? Or was it...
No, because Christ, the music is just, I mean, it's immortal. I've got no issue with crossover. I've got no issue with any other genre of music. It's just, for me, it has always been and will always be classical that just gets me going. And I think the reason for that is because it's not that one is better than the other. I've done a lot of work with music education, with kids, 9-, 10-year-old kids, and I wouldn't in a million years dare to try and convince any 9-year-old girl that somehow, you know, Chopin is better or more important than Jessie J. It doesn't work like that. It's about what works for you. And the thing with classical for me is that you can have one piece of music, whether it's 3 minutes or 30 minutes long, of classical that somehow drags us through every emotion known to man. And it's like pure, undiluted, concentrated, intense, just, and I love that shit. I mean, I live for that. So there's something about it that will always be, for me, incredibly special and worth exploring more, and worth getting rid of all the barriers to it. Because I don't care if people despise classical. What I care about is them being force-fed shit that isn't classical, dressed up to look like it's classical. So you'll have, I don't know, someone singing something from Les Mis, and they'll go, this is opera, or they'll have, you know, the 50 best chill-out classics ever. So they'll take a 3-minute chunk from the middle of something, they'll get rid of the rest of it and say, this is classical music. I can't bear that. So give them a 25-minute piece, listen to it, experience it, and then if you don't like it, no problem at all, but at least listen to it first.
So the one piece of classical music that has had the most impact on my life, and I've never told anyone this, is Bolero.
Oh, what a piece.
But the reason it is because when I was at MIT as a freshman, I was in a fraternity house, and we had Hell Week, which was the initiation week where you had to make it through a lot of, you know, military type hazing. And they basically kept us out for 5 days straight, and we had to play Bolero over and over again, non-stop for 5 days.
And that didn't turn you mad?
When the tape stopped, we had to flip it like all night long, and so that song is always in my head.
Yeah.
And but it's beautiful.
It's an amazing piece, and it's so simple.
Yes.
It's based on one very simple melody, one very simple rhythm. I remember when it came out, I think one of the critics or someone or another composer, I can't remember who, they actually used it as evidence that Ravel had lost his mind. It's like he's gone mad. Because he had gone mad in a way. He was a truck driver in World War I, Ravel, and just was never the same afterwards. The things he saw and the things he experienced. But it's an amazing piece. There's so many of them. There's an infinite amount. Mozart's complete works has just been released on 70 CDs. Just think about that for a sec. This guy, he dies at 35. 70 CDs for his complete work. Imagine that. Imagine somehow not just being able to play and perform, but actually composing that volume of music. and I mean, within what? He started, I don't know, at 5, like some precocious asshole. 30 years being able to churn out that, and the consistency and the fact that still 250, 300 years down the road, 500 years, 1,000 years down the road, it's still going to be listened to and studied, and people, the greatest minds of our generations, are going to be going, I mean, beyond our comprehension. That's something worth exploring, man.
Do you think about your legacy of music?
No, I don't have a legacy. No, come on, man. Dickens leaves a fucking legacy. You know,
you're
really,
talking about
Mandela leaves a legacy. Beethoven leaves a legacy. No. I hope, I think I said something like this in the book. The only legacy I think I could ever dare to hope to leave would be enough money so that my children don't have to do a job they hate and worry about the mortgage, and can focus on doing just what makes them smile, like from the inside out. But no, I mean, I'll do the best I can. I'll always strive to be a slightly better husband, a better father, a better human being. But no, I don't think, you know, a bunch of albums and some concerts and a book is gonna be much of a legacy.
But you will leave music behind. And some of these greats, like you talked about, left sometimes lots of music behind.
Yeah.
And also some of them were never recognized for their music while they were alive.
No, my God, that's absolutely. I mean, Schubert, this guy who was like 5'0". He was so ugly. He had the most terrible. His nickname was Mushroom Face. I mean, he was just really had syphilis, lost his hair, just couldn't get laid for love nor money, broke. I mean, seriously broke. The last 12 years of his life, he earned the equivalent of about $1,000 a year. Like 90% of everything he wrote wasn't performed in his lifetime. Never. It just, and yet now recognized as one of the greatest composers who ever lived. I think that, you know, them's the breaks, right? You got to try.
Do you ever recognize that you're an outlier in that you're being recognized for the music that you do now in real time, whereas many musicians just had to toil on? And
I don't know. I resent you quoting Malcolm Gladwell for a start.
I didn't call you a black swan, though,
I don't know. I don't know. I recognize the being a music. I mean, that's a lovely thing to say. Thank you. You know, for me, it's always going to be about music, and without sounding too evangelical, trying to bring music to as many people as possible. One of the things in the book that I'm most proud of is the fact that there's a Spotify playlist that runs alongside it, where instead of these, you know, box set, you know, 50 greatest revision classics ever, or there are, you know, over 20 hand-picked pieces that just, I mean, will nail you to the wall. And not just the pieces, but they're performed by people I've chosen who I absolutely they're the best recordings you can get of these pieces. They are absolutely just the nuts.
A few performed by you as well?
One performed by me. Okay. I was cheeky enough to do that. And it was the Chacon, this piece that I discovered when I figured I'm allowed that. 1 out of 23, 24 is okay. But the rest, you know, performed by my heroes, Glenn Gould, Evgeny Kissin, you know, I mean, these amazing, amazing musicians. And they're not easy pieces, some of them. You know, Prokofiev and Shostakovich, they're not, but they are immortal. And so the fact that now there are, you know, a few 100,000 people listening to this stuff, and it's growing all the time, all around the world, for free. What a time to be alive. Think about that. You know, in the palm of our hand, we have a device that can listen to pretty much every piece of music that has ever been composed. Within a split second, you tap and it's there. That's something else, man.
Has anyone done what you did, as in put a specific track for each chapter and then put that on a free Spotify list before?
I don't think so. It just seemed inevitable. It just seemed like the most natural thing in the world.
Yeah, some people have said sometimes it's too much. Sometimes the music combined with your prose on some of these chapters.
Yeah, but that's a great thing. We love too much. My God, isn't that great? Isn't that great not to have just the kind of absolute mind-numbing just, yeah, everything's just mediocre and okay. It's nice to feel overwhelmed sometimes. Yeah. It's important.
Let's talk about this book. It's a great title, Instrumental, a Memoir of Madness, Medication, and Music. Your website is great because on the front page it has a cup of coffee with some pills floating around underneath it. I did catch that. Why write the book now? Why write the book at all?
I was asked by Canongate, who's a publisher I respect immensely. I love writing. I've written a lot for the press in the past, for The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Spectator, and it's very easy to I have been very critical of classical music, the industry, in the past, and it's very easy to criticize. And it's at times I feel like, you know, some people have said, well, it's easy to criticize. What are the solutions? So I wanted to offer some ideas that I had for the industry and for musicians and for those wanting to get into classical music. I wanted it to be a love letter to my son, who's the greatest miracle in my life, and to my wife, Hattie, who just is astonishing. And it's a love letter to music as well. So there are all these things I wanted to talk about. And they said, you know, it's a memoir. They'd like a memoir. And I thought, well, there's no point just writing the good stuff, the easy stuff, the stuff that kind of makes me smile. It would seem just very disingenuous to do that. So I wanted to include the stuff that is not so easy and the stuff that is rarely talked about. This isn't the first time I've talked about it. This has all been public domain for a long time, 6, 7, 8 years. I've talked about child abuse and self-harm and being in locked psychiatric wards and suicide attempts. I've made TV shows for Channel 4 where we've, you know, talked about that in quite a lot of detail. But this was the first time I was able to put it very clearly in my own words and in context. So I thought, why not? I was only 38. It seemed quite young to write a memoir, but they asked, and I felt like a great opportunity to say, you know, listen to this music. I mean, if nothing else, just listen to this music. I don't care if you don't buy the book, listen to the playlist. I mean, that's, but everything else was in there, and it needs to be talked about. You can't open a paper nowadays without seeing more just vile revelations of the rape of children on an epidemic level, historical or current. This country has the highest incident of self-harm in Europe. People are just slicing their fucking arms up left, right and center, and it's not just skinny teenage girls. They're bankers and grandparents and, you know, successful people and mums, and it's important to talk about that. It's so misunderstood. If you cut yourself, it's not because you want to kill yourself. It's not an indicator of suicidal ideation. It's so much. It's the opposite of that. It's a coping mechanism. It's a way of controlling the pain and releasing endorphins and getting through the day. And it was the hardest addiction for me to stop. And I wanted to be brave enough to put my name and face to it, because I don't do it anymore, and I've come out the other side. And actually, I'm not just existing, I'm thriving, I'm doing pretty well. So, you know what, you can go through 5 years of getting absolutely just brutally raped. You can end up trying to kill yourself. You can end up with all kinds of drug addiction issues and self-harming and just really, I mean, levels of depression that are almost unsurvivable. And actually, you can come out the other end. And music played a big part in that, and love played a big part in that, and the kindness of strangers played a massive part in that. Kindness is the most underrated and valuable thing that we have. And it's got to the point now where people mistake kindness for flirtation. It's so rare. You do something kind for someone and they're like, what, do you want to fuck me? I mean, really, that's what's happened. And that breaks my heart. And so all of these things, this is a long answer to a very short question, I wanted to put in a book. And I've done that, and now it's out. But it was a long, long journey to get it published.
When you wrote that first draft and gave it to the publisher or maybe a close friend, was it as raw as it ended up being? Or is that something that evolved over time?
No, it was pretty much there from the beginning. I wrote most of it between kind of 3 a.m. and 9 a.m., just up all night.
Insomniac.
Total insomniac, but just get it out, like lancing a boil, just get it out. And I set myself a target of 2,000 words a day, and it ended up being 5,000 a day, just because I just worked very quickly. And you know, they weren't necessarily in the right order, it wasn't necessarily any good, but I got it done, and it was kind of there. And then it was just a case of working with my editor and my manager and making sure it was, you know, the way I wanted it to be.
Let's talk about the child rape stuff, because we're going to have to. And it's also weird because it's kind of topical in Britain right now, whereas if you'd written this 10 years ago or 20 years ago, people might not have maybe even read it or understood it. And
well, not just in Britain, I mean in America, the Catholic Church. My God, and that, telling you, this is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this hasn't even started yet, and that's terrifying. But yeah, of course, here it's everywhere.
And Britain is trying to get its head around, like, because it's a gripping with itself and the fact that it allowed these things to happen. It's almost like looking in the mirror when we hear stories about what happened to you. And it sounds like it's just only beginning, like you said, starting to heal, starting to open up, starting to talk about it.
There needs to be a momentous cultural shift about this stuff. And I fully understand the reasons for not wanting to talk about it. Why would you? Why would anyone want to open a paper with their cornflakes in the morning and read about, you know, children being raped? I mean, it's one of those things we just go, can't. I fast forward, I can't do it. You just think, I can't. But these are real people going through real things, and it's everywhere. And it's only by talking about it is there a chance that it will stop. And those who've been through it, who are lucky enough to survive, will have a shot at, I mean, not just justice, but healing, which is much more important, I think. So it's important to talk about the stuff that is not said.
Are we having the right conversations about it right now in Britain, or is it just kind of like, this headline comes out, this headline, it kind of gets pushed away.
It'll be a process. I think it's going to take a while. I think we are. I think there's a lot more awareness. I think what I know is if what happened to me 35 years ago was happening today, it would not have gone on for 5 years. It probably would have happened, but it would have got caught and there would have been a stop put to it. And that's got to be seen as progress, right? I think things are harder today in a way too with the internet, and you know, the people sometimes tend to assume that looking at indecent images of children isn't as bad in some way as actually physically abusing a child, but it's exactly the same. There's no distinction at all between the two. It's still you are facilitating a child being raped by looking. If there was no demand, it wouldn't be going on. And just by looking, terrifies me. I mean, the one thing I'm grateful for is that, to my knowledge, there weren't photographs taken of me. It was so long ago. It was well before the internet and digital cameras, any of that. But I know people who still now, as adults, they know there are images of them as children circling around the web, having the most appalling things being done to them. Imagine what that must feel like, knowing that some guy in some flat in New York or the Philippines or Manchester is getting off to look at a picture of you 10 years ago. I mean, there's a lot more that we need to do, and we are doing. I'm filled with admiration for the way the police are handling things, for the way finally certain politicians are starting to handle things.
I'm going to just quote you. It was an interview I saw you talking about the child rape, and you said the toxic shame that does not finish, it somehow gets bigger when the abuse ends, and that's what they don't tell you. There's a ripple, myriad of symptoms, the medications, the side effects, the legacy, the abuse, but you said it's not abuse, it's child rape.
Yeah, abuse is, you know, you tell a traffic warden to fuck off. I mean, that's abuse. It's, you know, these words we use like molesting. What is that? I mean, come on, let's call it what it is. I mean, really, you can't. And the effects are extraordinary. And, you know, even worse in a way than the physical act of abuse is what they do to you while it's going on, which is, they're very good. They all say, in one way or another, the one consistent thing about child rape is they say, you can't talk about this. Don't tell anyone about this. They have different ways of doing it, but that's the message they give. And think about that for a sec, what that means when there are other people there and you have to shake hands with that person, or you have to chat and act normally in front of them because they're your priest or your uncle or your teacher, and they make you complicit in it. So it's like you're a partner in crime with them. Every time you don't say something, every time you act normally, every time you pretend everything's okay, it grows, this sense of, I'm really in this now, we're a team here, and we're bound by this secret, and you know what, I'm making that happen. And that's a metric fuck ton of responsibility to put on a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old. No kid should have, I mean, come on. And then, of course, you hear these terrible stories of the kids who are brave enough to say this is happening, and they're told, no, it's not. What are you talking about? This guy is like, he's head of the church. Have you seen the charitable work he does? And I mean, what does that do to a psyche of a child? And I think that's what I meant when I'm talking about the ripple effects, is that it goes on for decades. I mean, I still now, the issues I had with everything from trust to sex to sudden noises to things on TV that, you know, triggers, you know, is the buzzword of our day along with mindfulness, you know, trigger warnings, but they're everywhere. And, you know, you learn to live with them and deal with them, but my point is that we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to learn to deal with that stuff for so long. And yet we do, because it still goes on.
And this happened to you from like age 6 to 10?
Yeah.
I remember you saying in an interview that you still liked him at the
yeah.
time, because it's this very, like you said, strange relationship that it's very hard to understand.
unless, I mean, of course it's hard to understand, but you've got to look at it through a child's eyes. You got to think, okay, if I were a kid who felt like he wasn't particularly popular, didn't have many friends, was quite isolated, was quite awkward, wasn't very athletic, wasn't very academic, and always felt alone even when he was in a crowd. And then suddenly there's a guy who seems to be 8 foot tall and invincible and strong and everything you would want to be. And he's giving you attention, and he's treating you differently, and he's giving you presents, and he's holding you back after class and opening his drawer in his desk where there's something just for you. And you feel, as a child, you know, this guy, you know, I'll take it. The pain, that what happened after that, it's a price worth paying, because I'm special. I mean, I know it breaks my heart to say it, but I can't blame a 5-year-old for thinking that way, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old. That's the way we're designed as humans. We want to feel loved and special and included. We still do as adults, of course we do. I mean, God, we put up with shit as adults from crazy girlfriends or crazy boyfriends because that's better than being alone. And it's not right, but we do it, we all do it. So yeah, I did still like him, which, you know, now looking back, I mean, I'm not angry about that fact, but I have some compassion for it and some understanding for it.
I had the writer Jeff Thompson in here. He's a BAFTA-winning screenwriter, but he also used to work the door in Coventry, and you know, he had an experience like this when he was younger, and he was able to finally see that man and confront him many years later, and was able to confront him like kind of like not in anger. But I don't think you ever had that chance. And do you ever think that you wish you could have confronted him or pressed charges, or would that have not been the point?
Well, he was charged. He was tracked down, he was arrested, he was charged, and then he got sick. He had a stroke. He died before the case could go to trial. But I didn't see him face to face. This was done by the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. But no is the short answer. What would I say to the guy? You know, what is interesting is that on occasion people have, not many, but on occasion some people have thrown this idea at me of you're only using this part of your backstory to flog albums and to get a bit of sympathy and attention, and I understand, you know, people say things like that in the comment section of interviews or online or on Twitter or whatever, and that's the world in which we live. And I always say to them, look, in 2009 I gave an interview with the Sunday Times, and it was a big 2-page thing. And in one paragraph, for a couple of lines, I talked about the fact that this happened when I was at school. It was the first time I talked about it in public. And a teacher who'd been at the school, who'd witnessed some of the effects of that abuse, she found me kind of hysterical, blood kind of coming down my legs. And she read this thing, and she suddenly, you know, she knew who it was. She knew exactly what I was talking about, even though I didn't mention the school or the teacher or whatever. She came forward and she came to the police and she gave a statement. And with her statement as well, which corroborated what I'd said, they tracked this guy down. And at the time of his arrest, he was a part-time boxing coach for under 10-year-old boys in his 80s. And so when people occasionally they say, oh, you're just trying to, I tell them that story and I say, would you rather I had not said anything? This guy was now teaching your niece or nephew or grandson or son and getting up to God knows what with them? Or would you rather I did speak out and other people speak out as a result, and they put a stop to it? And I mean, it's a no-brainer to me.
You said that it even changed the way you think about sexuality after that. You said you remember you were with a girl one time on a date and you were like,
oh God,
should we go have sex in the bathroom, as if it was maybe a...
Do you want a cup of coffee? I mean, really, we were sitting there and in, what's it called? My Old Dutch. It's a pancake place on the King's Road. And she was so pretty and I was so excited because it was like one of the first dates I'd been on. I was 15, 16, whatever. We have our thing and I'm like, so why don't we go fuck in the toilet? Like, I mean, and it never occurred to me there was anything wrong with that at all, and the look on her face. So yeah, of course, there's all kinds of impacts. Yeah.
You said, and I'll just probably quote you one more time, you said the impact rape makes on a person, it's like a stain that's ever present. There's reminders every day, every time you take a shit, watch TV, see a child, glimpse a newspaper, hear the news, you know, have sex, wank, drink something unexpectedly hot, take a big gulp, cough or choke. It's just always there, underlined.
Yeah, it's always there. I mean, and that's just the way it is. And it hasn't gone away. That's the thing. I think sometimes we have an expectation that things will go away once the actual, you know, the physical act stops. Then you're okay. It's done. But that's not my experience, and certainly it's not the experience of a lot of other people I know who've been through similar things. However, there is an amazing capacity that we have in here and in here to not kind of get rid of that, but to kind of almost embrace it and assimilate it. And, you know, I look at the life I live now and what I do for my job and how I act with my friends and my marriage and my son. And I think really this is a good life. This is a good thing. This was not how I envisaged it going. This is really a bonus. Didn't think I was capable of it. That was another thing. When I became a father, like the relief of knowing finally that I really understood what people had said, that love you experience when you become a father, that unconditional. I never really thought, oh, you know, I'm sure for them, but and then suddenly out comes this kid and you hold it and you're like, oh my God, that's what it is. I would walk under a bus without hesitation, like as natural as breathing, to stop a hair on his head being hurt. It's like the switch went on. And I thought, oh, thank God, I'm capable of it. I'm not some psychopath. And so there are lots of things now that, you know, it doesn't necessarily have, it doesn't ruin lives. It hasn't ruined my life. It's, you know, it's not ideal. But, you know, the thing about the book too is that it's really very, very, very seriously not a misery memoir. It's not one of those just unremittingly bleak. It's not. It's a book about music and love and things that are shiny and lovely and enhancing, and I think that's an important thing to talk about. This stuff is a small percentage of the whole thing.
And yet this book was almost not published.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court almost kept it from being published. Did you ever in your wildest dreams think that could happen when you started writing?
No, fuck no. I mean, we're in Britain. We don't ban books in this country. What the fuck? I mean, I'm not inciting terrorism, and even if I was, it still wouldn't have been banned.
To watch the rest of this fascinating interview, click on the link below and go to londonreelacademy.com. There you can sign in with your social media, log in and watch the rest of the episode for free, along with all of our episodes on London Reel, my webinars, and all of our premium content, all located over at londonreelacademy.com. So click on the link below, you'll be directed there and you can watch the rest of this fascinating interview, and I'll see you there.
It was like, I mean, a bunch of judges sitting there and saying, Mr. Rhodes, I'm sorry, your past, you're not entitled to. It does not exist.